question, of course, is what is Rosh Hashanah all about? And what can we learn from Rosh Hashanah, from the themes of Rosh Hashanah, and translate those lessons into our day-to-day lives? So I want to really explore just 5 lessons. Of course, I'm not saying that these are the only 5 lessons. There are so many more. But those 5 lessons, I believe, are at the very heart of Rosh Hashanah, the day, what is referred to also as the day of judgment, the day in which we are judged. God decides almost everything that needs to be decided for the upcoming year, both individually and collectively. And that's why we pray and gather and listen to the shofar to awaken our deeper self and be as in tune with what we need and what is needed from us on this day of judgment. But I'm sharing my screen right now. Let's see if this works. There we go. Can everyone see this? Yeah, thumbs up. All good? Okay, excellent, good. All right, so these are the 5 themes that I put together for you to really explore together. And again, I'd much rather this be a dialogue than a monologue. So feel free to voice your comments and questions and disagreements. But let's go directly to theme number 1 that stems really from a psalm that we say each and every day of this month of Elul in preparation of the high holidays. And then we continue to say this psalm each and every day of Tishrei up until Sukkot, up until the end of Sukkot, up until Hoshana Rabbah, the 7th day of Sukkot. We say this month that in a way aligns us with the theme of the holiday, with our ability to look deeply within and really unleash our purpose in life. This is Psalm 27, a psalm that is really, my humble opinion, who am I to say, but one of the most beautiful psalms in the book of Psalms that has 150 psalms altogether. It's certainly one of the psalms that awaken our purpose, our God-given purpose in life, maybe more than any other psalm. So I encourage everyone really to say it each and every day of this month. But in this psalm, we find an interesting verse. Who wants to read? Let's read here this verse and the message of this verse, which again, I believe is deeply connected to the theme of this month and the theme of the high holidays and Rosh Hashanah in particular. Does anyone want to read? Recognizing the homeless. Anyone? Just unmute yourself and say it off. There you go. I see you, Julie. Go for it, please. Well, we can hear you, Julie. You're on mute.
Okay.
There you go. Perfect.
Sorry. Recognizing the homeless. During these days, we recite Psalm 27. To you, my heart says, seek out my face, my internal self. It is so easy not to see people's real faces. Even our closest kin, we often recognize only by their garments, by their externalities. If they are not dressed as we are accustomed, we can easily ignore them. But a relationship means that I seek to connect with your panim, with your internal self. It is also true in regard to our relationship with ourselves. Do you recognize?
Continue. Go ahead. Do you recognize?
Do you recognize your own true face, or do you only know about your external self, defined by the design, clothing, your career, your hairstyle, your watch, your car, your outer display? Can you recognize yourself in the clothing of the homeless? This is the secret of the shofar, to pay attention to the crude, simple, primal voice beyond sophistication. And this is why Judaism is so sensitive to modesty in clothing. Unlike Islam, which attempts to suppress the beauty of the body by demanding that women cover it completely, Judaism attempts to conceptualize the beauty of the body so that it does not assume the most important significance in our lives at the expense of our inner personality and soul. For the most important thing is always to recognize and respect the insides.
Right, hence the laws of modesty that don't seem to erase our eternal personality, maybe like other religions, but quite the opposite. They seem to be sidelined or modest so that our inner personality can be that facet that truly shines. But again, going back to the verse, seek out my face, my internal self. Here King David teaches us what the Kabbalists have emphasized, and that is that the deepest yearning of the soul is not to know the world without, but rather to know the world within. That's why the word for face, seek out my face, in Hebrew is panim. As you just said, Julie, that's because the word panim does not just mean face in Hebrew, it's interesting to note, but it also means internal. It comes from the word pnimiyut. And that's because faith should really be a reflection of what is inside. Very often it is. That's why if we sat inside, our face reflects that. If we're happy inside, our face reflects that too. That face is a reflection of what is inside. What does it mean that our heart, to you, my heart says, that our heart says, seek out my face? It doesn't seek out this. It seeks out the root of the face. The root of the face, which is the soul, of what is happening within. That's what really we should be focusing on. That's why I say I think this is the deepest theme here of the holiday. That during this holiday, we are asked to go inward. You know, there are holidays in the Jewish calendar where we go outward. For example, Tu B'Shvat, we go out to the world and we cultivate the world and we focus on the trees and so on. But this holiday is where we go inward, where we have to go to the soul itself and to ask ourselves those real questions. Is our soul fulfilling its purpose? Are we allowing our divinity to shine, or our physicality to shine, and materialism to shine? Are we allowing our eyes to judge others by their souls or by their bodies? How do we view others? Do we view others really as infinite potentials, as divine beings, or do we really view them as limited physical beings? And on Rosh Hashanah, God tells us, no, read this psalm each and every day, Psalm 27, because we should be focusing rather on that infinite soul, on the divinity within each and every one of us, and within each and every one of our surroundings, and the people that surround us. I think that, you know, as you all know, Rabbi Steinholtz, our dear mentor, passed away just over 30 days ago. Yishloshim was this weekend. And it amazes me, one of the greatest flaws, if I may say, in the human condition. What am I referring to? It amazes me that now people are appreciating Rabbi Steinholtz like never before. I mean, everyone wrote about him, every who's who out there, from Hollywood stars to the Pope to the Prime Minister of Israel. Wow, he was such a great contribution to Jewish history. Well, how come you don't appreciate him before that? I mean, I didn't read. I mean, I'm pretty close to Rabbi Steinholtz. I didn't see. I mean, many did, of course, but not at the scope of what we're seeing after his death. And I think that's again because one of the great flaws of the human condition, and that is that we learn to appreciate people only after they die. And it's one of the greatest flaws indeed, because imagine how our world could look like, how humanity could look like, if we could appreciate people before they died. If we can say, I love you to people, not after they die, but before they die. If we can appreciate the beauty and the infinite light in people before they die, not just after they die. Why is it that the honorable or the beautiful and all those glorious adjectives have to be written on tombstones and not in our lips mentioning them when they are still alive? I don't know. It's one of the flaws of the human condition. Maybe because when a person dies, we learn to see the big picture. That we're not stuck in the bodies. We're not stuck at the limited flaws of people. We see really the soul. But what Rosh Hashanah calls us to do is exactly that. Appreciate others and appreciate ourselves. When we look at ourselves in the mirror, as we are within, not as we are without. And that's the idea of, as you read, Julie, of the sounding of the shofar. The sounding of the shofar should remind us of that inner voice, of that simple, crude, primal voice of the soul that is shouting for recognition, that is shouting for expression. That's what we should be focusing on Rosh Hashanah. And I think that, you know, we're speaking of a big idea here, but to put it as practically, to put it in a practical language as possible, in the most practical language, before we go to number 2. And that is that, you know, each time, just a daily exercise, each time we think of a negative thought about someone else or about ourselves, then of course, not only should we not verbalize it, oh, this guy's such a jerk. You have to say it, don't say it. Not only should we not verbalize it, but we should try and change that thought with a positive thought. I saw something negative in a person. I'd say that to my child, say it to myself. You saw something negative? Good. Can you see something positive now? Can you find something positive? Alternate that negative thought with a positive thought. And in a way, I think that's one way that to train our brains, to rewire our thinking, so to speak, so that we can fulfill the words that we just read, so that we can fulfill the desire of our heart that seeks out the face, the internal soul in each and every human being. and of course in each and every one of us. That's really the big idea. Again, I want to hear your comments. I shouldn't be the only one speaking. So if you have any questions, please. Yes, Janet.
Rabbi, why is what month exactly is this psalm to recite every morning?
A good question. So this is the month of Elul. During this month of Elul,
Okay.
so the month that precedes the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah. But also it is read up until during next month, the month of Tishrei, up until the 7th day of Sukkot, so that we stay in that mindset also throughout the high holidays.
Okay. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Hi, Rabbi. It's
Yes,
Hannah.
please.
I have another question, which is just the opposite. You know, and of course, respecting your parents and talking to them while they're alive is very important. But my question is, sometimes somebody dies, and at the funeral, they say such wonderful things about the person. And that's something, I hate to say it, but sometimes it bothers me. So do you have any response to that?
Why does it bother you?
Why does it bother me? Because it's, I don't know, it just, because, I don't know, maybe it shouldn't.
No, but I'm saying, look, because, yeah, I know it comes across as fake, but I don't think, I understand where you're coming from. I mean, yeah, now you're saying all these beautiful things. I know exactly how you treated this person that died during his lifetime. So what are you coming from?
The way that person was.
Right. So maybe that's why it's bothering you. But I'm saying that I think that's in a way, it's what rescues us from the negativities we were so immersed in before the person died. I think you know, when I hear eulogies like that, I say, okay, if you didn't see this beauty during the lifetime, thank God you're at least seeing it now. And no, it's never too late. No, you can always rewire your brain, as we just mentioned, and connect to a person in a deeper way. So at least it's happening now. For some people, it doesn't happen at all. Someone beautiful that just died, and beautiful within, of course. And even when they die, some people don't realize the beauty. That, you know, some people are blind, some people are deaf. What can we do? But I think that, in a way, it could sound fake, but it's quite beautiful that they finally realize it when people die. But that's my point. We shouldn't wait for that moment. We should do it way before. And again,
Thank you.
the practical way to do it is that when we see something negative and when we feel something negative, substitute that feeling, that thought with something positive. Fine, you saw the negative, but in every person there's something positive. So why don't you focus on that?
Rabbi?
Thank you.
Yes, Bonnie.
Hi, I'm Bonnie. Nice to meet you. Maybe something.
Bonnie. Nice to
something
have you. Are you local? I have to ask you. You from here or joining?
I'm a friend of Julie's.
Oh,
and,
okay, fine.
And my
Yes,
daughter was bat mitzvahed with Jackie Kay's son.
Oh, very nice. Okay,
Yeah.
so I think
it all kind of comes around.
Beautiful.
So I have a comment on Hannah. So maybe Hannah is saying, and forgive me if I'm interpreting it this way, that sometimes when you do go to a funeral and you do hear somebody saying something positive when you've only heard negative or you've only seen negative, that you think it's kind of a hypocrisy and you feel uncomfortable about that. And we all see that in different ways.
Right. And I could relate to that. I could certainly relate to that. And in a way it is hypocritical, but on the other hand, I think it's their way out of the hole that they dug for themselves, so to speak. They dug a hole of negativity for themselves. Fine. So thank God. Now you're appreciating the person. Come. We'll help you get out of it. Look at the appreciation. Speak about it. Focus on that from this point on. Hopefully you'll come out of that hole. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
you know, there's a lot of people that they always say that the guilty cry the loudest, somebody once said. And I guess that's their way of getting it out instead of us seeing it as a negative thing, like, oh, you really don't mean it. We know who you are. But I never thought about it in that perspective.
Right. Exactly. Hopefully it does. Hopefully it does reflect some type of epiphany that they had that now is making them change into more positive people. That's what we hope. Okay.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes, please.
It's Lindsay. I just wonder, how do you deal with people, as you said from the beginning of this, people who now, after someone dies, they're there at the funeral and they're talking about them on, and they haven't had anything to do with them for a long time. And then all of a sudden, now they're dead. They're at the funeral and they're everywhere talking about them.
So again, that's a good question. I think we should be giving these people a second chance. Yes, I know they sound hypocritical. Yes, they haven't been in touch, and maybe they were even mean and cruel to the deceased. But God gives us second chances, third chances, fourth chances. We say it every day in our Amidah prayer. God who's compassionate, who never gives up on us, really. Marbei Lisloach, he keeps forgiving us again and again and again. So if God has that quality, shouldn't we too? Fine. So they didn't speak to the person for a long time. Yes, they spoke very negatively about the deceased for a very long time, or whatever it may be. I hope you mean it now. I hope that you changed really your perspective. I'm going to give you a second chance, a third chance. I hope that this death will somehow enable you to see the other side of the person and to start respecting him or her. But I think we should give those people a second or third chance. You know, a Hasidic story comes to mind. But a Hasidic story about a businessman who would travel for business some 200 years ago from town to town in Poland and in Russia. And one day he, and during his travels, he would also go to the town of his Rebbe, of his Hasidic Rebbe. And when he would come to that town, he would immediately change into Hasidic garbs, because he said to himself, it's not respectful of the rabbi that I come in with my business clothes, so I'm going to change into my Hasidic garbs, go for my private audience, come out, and then changing into my business clothes and continue with my travels. One year he said to himself, well, who am I lying? Who am I cheating here? I'm going to stay with my business clothes. I'm cheating my rabbi. I'm going to remain true to who I am. This time I'm not going to change into my Hasidic garb. He walked into the rabbi's office, the Rebbe, the big Hasidic rabbi's office, and he said, look, Rabbi, I know you're probably shocked to see me like this, but I want you to know that I would change for you each and every time this year when I would come visit you. Usually I do wear only these clothes. That's who I am. This year I decided not to lie. And the Rebbe responded to him, well, one second. You think I didn't know that? You think I didn't know that that's the clothes you wear all the time and that you were coming just out of respect for me with my Hasidic garbs? But I thought that you were lying to the world when you wore those business clothes. And when you came here in my office, you were finally being true to yourself. Now you're telling me that it's the opposite, that you're lying to me and not to the world. But that's a Rebbe perspective. That's a holy man's perspective. Then, yes, you have different facets to you. Everyone has multiple facets to them. That's why, again, the word panim in Hebrew is in the plural tense. There is no word for one face. We spoke about this in the past. Because we have multiple faces. The face I have with my spouse is not the face I have with my children. The face I have with my children is not the same face I have with my colleagues, and so on. We have multiple faces. The question is, what is the true reflection of our deeper self? Which face is it? It's the face with the Hasidic garbs. The Rebbe sees you. Yes, you could see yourself as a businessman. You could see yourself as a materialistic being. But when I see you, all I see is a soul. That's the Rebbe vision of people. And we should have that same vision. That when people act differently and not in an appropriate way, that's not them. That's not them. It's some monster that took over them. Now, hopefully, when people die and then people start seeing, those hypocrites start seeing, oh, wow, second, I was judging them by the business side, but not by the Jewish or soulful side. Maybe then they really mean it. And maybe then that will create some fundamental shift in their perspective that will allow them to see the deceased in a soulful way, and hopefully also others in a soulful way. So if that's the way they're at least behaving during the funeral, why not give them the second chance? Because maybe it will enable them to continue that fundamental shift in their perspective, to have that Rebbe vision of people themselves. Yes, Jen.
And I personally have found that sometimes if you're not close with someone, and then kind of going back to your question, Mindy, you know, that it might be hypocritical, or you're not close to someone and they pass away and then you kind of are there. I found personally, you know, out of, unfortunately, you know, that it, you know, it's happened to me, that you're there for the people that are alive. You know, you're there to help the grieving people. Just, you know, you kind of know, you've been in their shoes and you know what it's like, and you do kind of want a second chance on situation because it kind of touches something that you feel kind of drawn to go and help and kind of just be there. If they connect to you, great. If they don't, it's great as well. But at least you're kind of doing something that,
Right.
It's a good thing. I mean, I can't ever think that that's a bad thing. So,
No, well said. Absolutely, absolutely. It's not just the words about and the approach you have towards the deceased, but it's also your being, the approach you have towards those that are alive, and you being there for them also helps, regardless of what your connection was with the deceased. Okay.
All good points.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Excellent. Excellent. All right. Let's continue here with number two. Thought number two that I think reflects the theme of Rosh Hashanah and of this month, this high holiday season altogether. Does anyone want to read? Your note counts. Anyone? Please. Julie, go for it again then. Go ahead. But again, you're on mute.
Sorry, I don't know why
Right.
no one else wants to read, but anyway, your note counts. The one and only unique mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah is to listen to the shofar. Jewish law dictates that not only that hear the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, but also the types of sounds we must hear, and what is even more, the length of the sounds. For example, the sound of teruah, a succession of short sounds, must consist of minimum 9 sounds, not less. Shevarim, the longer groans, must consist of at least 3. What is the significance of this? Judaism teaches that we are all musicians in the grand cosmic symphony of history. Maybe to the average, it doesn't make a difference how you live, what you do every day, how you work on your moral and spiritual life, but to the conductor of the world symphony, who knows every note of music that is supposed to be played, who appreciates the unique note that only you can produce through your life, to him it makes a grand difference. Each one of us constitutes an indispensable note in the divine symphony. When even one note is missing in the blowing of the shofar, one soul may not be accounted for, and it disqualifies the entire mitzvah. For every note of every soul has infinite value in the great symphony we call history.
Right. And any conductor knows that if there's even just one instrument missing in a 120 musician symphony, it still affects the whole symphony. Now, every instrument is unique. Now, you know, there's a beautiful analogy in the Midrash of how the Jewish people are compared to the letters of the Torah, of a Torah scroll. What's interesting is that in the Torah scroll, every letter also has to be perfect, has to be completely wholesome, written in a flawless way. Now, if there's a letter that is damaged, just one letter that is damaged in the Torah scroll, the whole Torah scroll is deemed non-kosher until that letter is fixed. And that's the analogy that the Midrash uses to express this very idea, that we are all unique letters. By the way, if you walk into CBT, you may have seen that beautiful art piece that we have at the entrance in the lobby, in which there's a big Torah scroll and everyone carries a letter, because we really believe that everyone has their own letter, their own uniqueness, their own purpose, their own divine purpose in this world. Now, everyone has to fulfill that purpose, that unique purpose, for that symphony to be wholesome, just like every letter needs to be wholesome in the Torah, for the Torah to be wholesome and kosher. So not only are we each unique, but our ability to express that uniqueness and that unique divine purpose in our own lives is what makes the whole symphony, the whole of humanity wholesome. It's what makes us kosher. It's what brings in a grander scale, maybe, it's exactly what brings peace and that ultimate redemption to the world, because then the whole world can be one symphony that harmonizes the sweetest melody, so to speak, and in a way draws down God's presence in the most smooth way. So that's the idea of the shofar itself. There are many different sounds, but every sound counts. Now, yes, there are sounds. I don't know if I experience every 1 year in the blowing of the shofar. It's a pretty hard. It's not so hard actually, but you play the trumpet, if you play the clarinet, it comes to you very easily. But when you blow the shofar, you know that you could have multiple tekiyas, right? There are multiple tekiyas in the blowings of the shofar of Rosh Hashanah, but no tekiya is alike the other. So the sounds might be called the same. They might both be tekiya, which is, the long note, but still they are different. Each tekiya stands alone because one might be shorter than the other, one might come out slightly on a higher note than the other, or whatever it may be. Every sound is different. And that is exactly what this message is here, that every sound of the shofar is different, just as every human being is different. And I would say that this number 2 year connects to number 1. That is that on Rosh Hashanah, we ought to ask ourselves, how are we different? I'm not like my neighbor. No, I'm not trying to keep up with the Kardashians. Which thank God they just announced yesterday that that's it. The season is ending. I think the program won't be aired anymore after this season or whatever it may be. But that's not what life is. It's not about keeping up with someone else. It's keeping up with my deeper self. Who am I? Huh? What makes me unique? What type of personality do I have? What type of opportunities am I given today? The opportunities I'm given today of meeting certain people, of being in certain places, of dealing with certain situations and challenges are not given to anyone else. That's certainly what makes me unique. Am I making the best of it? Am I seizing really every moment to turn them into a divine calling? And that's the question we should be asking ourselves also on Rosh Hashanah. How am I making my unique note sound its unique music to the world? That's the idea here of the shofar. That's 2. I want to move on to 3, but of course, please, I welcome any comments or disagreements and so on. No? Okay, fine. So let's move on to 3. Does anyone want to read number 3? Unless we'll revert to Julie once again if no one else wants.
I will.
Oh, thank you.
I need to practice. I need to practice my English. Thank you. I'm just kidding. From the text of the blessing, we see that a mitzvah is not allowed to blow the shofar, but to hear the sound of the shofar, lishmoa kol shofar. That is why we don't all have to blow the shofar, only to hear it. But why are the commandment to listen to the shofar as opposed to blowing it yourself? Judaism is teaching us the value of listening. Listening does not come easily. Active listening is a behavior that takes deep love. It is hard just to listen, not to respond, not to react, not to solve, not to resolve, not to placate, not to what's that? Yeah, thank you. Not to address, not to address, not to witness. I'm sorry, my phone was ringing. Do you know how to truly listen to your children, to your spouse, to your friends? Do you know how to be fully present in their lives and create that space where they can share and you can truly listen? Listening is the call of Rosh Hashanah. It means putting our own self, our own ego, our own needs away for a few moments. Perhaps this is why the Shema was chosen as the watchword of our faith, to remind us each morning and evening just how important it is to slow down, pause for a moment, humble ourselves before Hashem, and just listen. And listen, you must to the sound of the shofar. When your loved ones speaks, listen, not only in the words, listen to the sound, listen to the primal sound of the core of the words.
Right. Okay. I think that's really one of the most important lessons of life. It's not our ability to speak, but rather our ability to listen. I think connects to what Janet was saying. Sometimes you just have to be there for others, to listen, not to speak, not to share your own opinions, just to listen. And again, it connects to the most important prayer of Judaism, the Shema. Shema means to listen. And that's why the blessing of the shofar is lishmoa kol shofar, not to blow the shofar ourselves, but rather to listen to the shofar, because the best way to start the year, and indeed the best way to connect to our deeper self, is to listen to that deeper self, to listen to what God wants from us, not just what we want from ourselves. That's what the idea of the shofar is. Now, to evoke again my dear beloved mentor, Rabbi Steinsaltz, passed away just, as mentioned, just over a month ago. And I know I've mentioned this in the past, but I can't stress this story enough and the importance of this lesson enough. But I remember that when I became a rabbi, I got my certificate, and I came to him and I said to him, what is this all about? Fine, I have a certificate. What's it about? What does it mean to be a rabbi? And he responded as follows. He says, it's very, I'll tell you what it is. It boils down to this idea. Being a rabbi means that now you'll have a lot of people come and ask you questions. Your duty as a rabbi is not to answer the question. It's to answer the question behind the question. That's your duty. Because many people will come and speak to you about A and B, but what they really mean is C. It's D. They just maybe don't have the courage or don't have the words to articulate what C is. So they'll hide behind A and B. What you have to really identify as a rabbi is the C, the question behind the question. I think that's why in Hebrew, speaking of the Hebrew language, I think that's why it's fascinating to me. But you know, the word for bully in Hebrew, what's a bully in Hebrew? Or violent man in Hebrew? Alim. Alim, Aleph, Lamed, Yud, Mem. That's the word for a bully in Hebrew. Someone that's violent. Do you know what it means also besides being a bully? Alim also is the same word. If you change the vowels, the letters remain the same in the same order. You change the vowels, it's ilem, which means mute. Mute. Now, what's the connection between being a bully and being mute? It's the same word in Hebrew. Well, what's the connection? And the connection is, do you know why a bully is a bully? Because he does not express his deepest desires. He's mute. He does not express those desires. They're mute. So he reverts to violence. But there's a question behind the question. There's a reason behind the violence. There's something that's certainly bothering him. He just does not express it. He's mute. So he chooses the path of violence. But if we're able to understand, what's bothering you? Why are you so full of hatred? Why? There's something deep there. It's obviously not because you're just a man of hatred. There's something bothering. Maybe it's your upbringing. Maybe it's something a trauma that you just experienced. What is it that you cannot express? What is it that makes you mute? And that's really the beauty of these two Hebrew words. And I think the ultimate purpose of an educator and of a parent is not to connect to the outside expressions of our children, of our students, but of the internal beings, the internal desires, sometimes the internal challenges and hardships. Sometimes they don't even have words to articulate them. I know this, even on a simple level. I know that sometimes when my own children start crying or start acting out or start throwing temper tantrums, it's not because they really want ice cream. It's not because their brother just got on their nerves, but it's maybe because they had a problem in school today. Maybe something deeper than that. The ultimate educator is to understand what lies beneath it all. And that's why we are asked on Rosh Hashanah to develop that listening. The only way we can truly have a meaningful year in which we fulfill our divine purpose, as mentioned before, is through the art of listening. Being able to truly listen to the question behind the question in each and every human being and in each and every situation and challenge. So that's idea number 3. Again, I'd love to hear your comments. Otherwise, we'll move to 4 and 5. Any comments, questions? No, feel free to unmute yourself also.
Yeah.
I can't see you all.
It's me again.
Yes, Janet, please.
I'm asking a million questions.
No,
Sorry,
please.
I
love that. That's what study is about.
I actually sent it in the chat, but
Oh.
do rabbis take, and this might be completely off, but do rabbis take a psychology course or something of that nature what studying? In other words, is that something that's required? Because you just mentioned, like, you know, your mentor said, when they come to you with questions, you have to look at the question behind the question.
Right.
And obviously people, I mean, you know, like myself, come to you all the time with
Right.
questions. I mean, it's like a psychologist, a psychiatrist, you
Yeah.
know, and I'm just wondering if in the course itself, is there portion of, and that, you know.
No, it's a good question. Look, it's a very good question, because unfortunately the big answer to that is not really. Not really. We take a few courses, but certainly not thoroughly enough to be able to attend to that which we attend. But I'll add to that. I think just as it is true for psychologists and teachers and educators in general, you either have it or you don't. You know, not everyone's built to be a teacher, just like not everyone's built to be a rabbi. And you either have it or you don't. So yes, you could do all the learning in the world, which you should do. But even if you don't have it, even all the learning in the world won't help you. I think, you know, that's why the real question is not whether they learn in a rabbinic school. The real question is whether they teach you what profession really fits you best. Whether they teach you before you come to rabbinic school, whether rabbinic school is really good for you. That's where it should begin. And then if it is really fitting you and your personality, then in rabbinic school you should be learning all that is needed to be able to attend to people in the most effective way. But
Rabbi,
Thank you.
I was just going to say, it's not really an answer to what Janet said, but when I was looking for a shul, when I was coming to Arizona, to me, the number one priority was the community and the rabbi, because some rabbis I just don't relate to. And you know, there's one rabbi, I'm not going to mention names, obviously, but some rabbis I just don't, for some reason, I listen to them, and I've been listening a lot to Rabbi Steinsold, and he's just so amazing. So I think that, I don't know if a rabbi can take a lot of classes to learn how to be a mensch, just like a psychologist, like you said. You know, you can go to a psychiatrist and not like them, and then you go to somebody else and you love them. So that's my take.
No, you're right. And exactly. I think that's where, I mean, the sifting process should begin way before rabbinic school. But you're right. And by the way, it's true for any field of education, for teachers, for psychologists, for therapists, and so on. And now again, people may disagree with me, but I firmly believe in that. Now, I will add one more thing, though, that in rabbinic, you know, we speak about rabbis, but I would say that the rabbinic field is quite vast, and it's usually divided into three. You have rabbis that are congregational rabbis. You have rabbis that are research rabbis. They sit in yeshiva all day and they research topics, and they're more halachic rabbis. They'll tell you what the law is, and they'll deal with that. Just like, you know, you have psychologists that are researchers and psychologists that practice. And then you have also what they call today outreach rabbis. I hate the word outreach because I don't believe in outreach. It's in-reach that I believe in, not outreach. There's no Jew that's out there. Who am I to say who's out and who's in? But they are in-reach rabbis, so to use that better word. And they don't necessarily have congregation. They run all sorts of programs and all sorts of things. Now, I think that the ability to understand the question behind the question certainly belongs to the congregational rabbis and maybe even to the in-reach rabbis. The ones that deal with the law, that are on books and in books and, you know, on computers all day long, maybe they don't really need that skill. So you can still be a rabbi in that second field if you really want to be a rabbi. So that doesn't mean that if you don't have it, you shouldn't be a rabbi at all, but you have to really think about what suits you best.
Thank you,
Right.
Rabbi. I know I was off topic, but
No,
thank you
not
for
at all.
answering.
Not at all. No, I encourage these questions. Thank you for asking them. No, please. Thank you. Okay, let's go to number 4. Does anyone want to read besides Julie? Otherwise, Julie or Hannah, you've read, but anyone else?
Oh my God, are they all being shy?
I will.
I'll read.
Linda said she will.
I will.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Let's
Number
go.
4.
Who said I will? Linda, go for it. Linda, please go.
2 types of sweetness. There is a difference between the sweetness of an apple and the sweetness of honey. An apple is a sweet fruit which grows on a tree. There's nothing surprising about that. Many fruits are sweet. But honey comes from a bee, an insect that is not only inedible, it actually stings. Nevertheless, the honey that it produces is sweet. In fact, honey is sweeter than an apple. Similarly, there are two types of sweetness in our lives. We have times of family celebration, successes in our careers, personal triumphs, and harmonious relationships. These are sweet times, like the apple is sweet. But then there is a different kind of sweetness, a sweetness that comes from the time of challenge. When things don't go the way we would like them to, when we experience roadblocks and challenge. At the time when we are facing these challenges, they seem bitter and insurmountable, like the sting of a bee. But if we are strong and we withstand the difficult times and overcome the obstacles to our own happiness, we reveal layers of our personality that we would never have tapped into if we weren't challenged. So we eat apples and honey on the first day of the new year. We bless each other and ourselves that in the year to come, the apple should bring sweetness and what the bee stings should be even sweeter.
Okay, all right, beautiful. So you have that type of sweetness. That type of sweetness that comes from stings is way sweeter and maybe even more, even deeper. Look, I can tell you this as a rabbi, speaking of rabbis, I can tell you I see a lot of negative, but I also see a lot of positives. One of the great positives that truly inspire me. I was just sitting with someone yesterday. He was telling me his story, but what it is we're all facing the same global pandemic and all the challenges that come with it. But so we hear a lot of negative stories. Unfortunately, the media doesn't show us the positive stories. But I can tell you that I can write a book about it. I don't know if I'll waste my time doing that, but I can write about a book about it, about all the blessings that people have confessed, that saying that the coronavirus was good for us. The coronavirus was the greatest blessing. Now, if not the coronavirus, they would have never discovered those blessings. So yesterday I was sitting with someone and he tells me, look, I never had the courage really to leave my company and to start my own startup and to move to a different city in order to be in the best environment for this startup. Yet the coronavirus forced me out of my job and caused me to go and do what I always wanted. And I said to myself, well, you see, wow, no one speaks of those blessings that came from the challenge of the coronavirus. I can also tell you stories of people whose marriage life was in trouble. And all of a sudden, now the coronavirus happened, and they are spending more time at home, and they've decided to cultivate those relationships. And incredible miracles are being produced, are coming out of these challenges. And that's really what Judaism believes. In every challenge, there is an opportunity. And it's our duty to create sweetness from sting, to create opportunity from challenge, to create light from darkness, so to speak. That's what Rosh Hashanah reminds us of. Yes, we are not too naive to believe that when we stand on Rosh Hashanah in synagogue or in our homes and we are about to face the new year, that we think that everything is going to be so smooth sailing, that this year is going to be the best year ever. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not going to be as smooth sailing as we hope it will be. We know there'll be challenges, but am I going to have that apple dipped in the honey and think of my responsibility to transform the sting into honey, even when I face those challenges during the year? That's the big question, and that's really what Rosh Hashanah comes to teach each and every one of us. Speaking of yet another Hebrew word, I may have mentioned this in the past, but the word for crisis in Hebrew, mashber, is the same word as the biblical word that points to the beds on which women give birth. Mashber is that bed on which women give birth. Now, why? Because in every crisis, there's an opportunity for waiting to be born. That's why it's the same word. Some people get stuck in the negativities of the crisis that they don't see it. And here, the honey of Rosh Hashanah reminds us to choose the Jewish way, and that is to see the birth within the pain of the contraction, so to speak, of the challenge itself. All right, so that's number 4, and let's conclude here with number 5. Does anyone want to read this in conclusion? Anyone? Okay, Julie, go for it.
Why do we eat pomegranates on Rosh Hashanah? The classic explanation is that we should be full of mitzvot and good deeds like the pomegranate is full of seeds. But there are other fruits that are full of seeds. Many people say that they are not involved with Judaism because they don't want to be a hypocrite. Why go to services on Rosh Hashanah if I don't go the rest of the year? How can I light Shabbat candles on Friday afternoon if I don't keep Shabbat? You can't pick and choose, they say. This is wrong because mitzvot are like the seeds of a pomegranate. Most fruits have a little cluster of seeds somewhere in their center, but the pomegranate is full of seeds, and every one of those seeds is self-contained. Each seed is encrusted in its own little bulb of fruit. It has its own distinct place, separate from all the other seeds. A mitzvah is the same. Every mitzvah is a universe unto itself with its own spiritual power and its own unique blessing that it brings. Just because you don't keep some mitzvot, it does not mean that you shouldn't keep others. Each mitzvah you do plugs you into eternity and connects you with the divine and takes you higher. Every mitzvah is a unique opportunity for your soul to touch heaven. This is why the Talmud says, even the most disconnected soul is full of mitzvot like the pomegranate. A good deed has eternal worth no matter what else one does or doesn't do.
Fantastic. So to conclude and to emphasize this idea, I want to share with you a story that just came out, and maybe I'll send you the video, Janet, so you can share it with our group. But a story of a man named Saul Werdiger, who is the CEO of, forget the name of the company, but it's really the company that provides all sports clothes to all of the big sports organizations like the NBA and the MLB. And he focuses really on kid sizes. But as you can imagine, it's a very, very big company headquartered in New York. The head of the CEO of this company is Saul Werdiger, who's a very devout Jew. And he gives also a lot of charity. But he just came out with the story. It's on film, so I'll try to find it and send it to you, Janet, so you can share it with everyone, about how in 2014, during the Gaza war, when 15,000 rockets were showered upon Israel from the Hamas, from the terrorists in Gaza, the UN, the United Nations, of course, gathered time and time again to condemn Israel for its disproportionate reaction and so on and so forth. But during one of those votes, the Security Council was asked to condemn Israel, and South Korea was one of the countries, one of the, I think, 10 countries or whatever it is on the Security Council, and it decided to abstain. Now, no one quite understood why it abstained, and then it was revealed to Saul Werdiger. What was revealed to Saul Werdiger was that it was revealed to him by the South Korean ambassador over lunch in a kosher restaurant in New York. One day he gets a call from this ambassador, I forget his name, and he tells Mr. Werdiger, I'd like to meet you. Can you meet me for lunch? And he met him for lunch on this and that day. He came about half an hour late, the ambassador, and he's waiting for him. He says, I'm sorry I'm late, but let me tell you the story why I'm late. See, a few years ago when we moved here as the ambassadors of South Korea to the United Nations, we were very worried about our daughter. Our daughter is 19, 20 or something like that, was imbued with our family values, with the values of our culture. And we were very worried that she would come to New York and almost lose it all. So we tried to find a good place in which she can work. And someone recommended your company. And you were kind enough to give her a job and an internship position in your vast company. And we realized that this was the best decision we made coming to this country. She was so impressed and so inspired by you and your company. She was inspired by the fact that you get tons of people coming to us for money each and every day, rabbis and so on, and no one is left empty-handed. She was so impressed by the fact that every Friday you shut the company no matter what, so that everyone can go home for Shabbat. She was so impressed by the fact that you, Mr. CEO, would go from employee to employee each and every day and smile at them and say good morning, even if you didn't know them, and you do that to my daughter too. Now, all of a sudden, the Security Council at the United Nations decided to condemn Israel. And I said to myself, one second, I know Jews. The company that my daughter is at, that helped her preserve values that she came with from South Korea, is these Jews are kind people. They mention, they get it. Why condemn a Jewish state when I know now, I finally discovered who the Jews truly are. So I called the South Korean government, whoever it may have been, and I said to them, look, I know Jews, we shouldn't be voting against Israel. And they decided, therefore, to abstain. And I came here, he tells Saul Whittaker over lunch, to tell you what profound impact you had on me and on my vote today. Saul Whittaker sent himself an impact on you. I didn't know that one small deed of saying good morning with a smile to an intern here can change the fate of a vote in the United Nations and perhaps change the fate of Israel altogether. But it teaches me what our tradition always teaches me, what we just read, by the way, that a good deed indeed can change the world. We never know. We truly never know. This is a true story. And again, I'll try to find a video and send it to you, Janet. But again, it should emphasize this final lesson. That is that every seed of the pomegranate is a fruit in and of itself that can change the world. Every mitzvah that carries a light that can impact the entire fate of countries and of nations. That's how we should relate to every mitzvah. Yes, sometimes we can't do it all. We can go to Rosh Hashanah, but we can't, whatever it may be. Doesn't matter. So at least do that mitzvah. Don't give up on one mitzvah because you think you can chew on more than your mouth is built to chew on. That's all right. That's fine. God doesn't want you to chew on everything, but he does want you to treat every mitzvah as if that's the mitzvah that could change the world. If you can treat every mitzvah like that seed of the pomegranate, then no doubt the light that will emanate from them will bring change, positivity, light, and goodness to our world.